Jasmine Crockett Embarrasses Barron Trump. Trump's son is so young. The lights inside the Capitol studios burned brighter than ever, not metaphorically, literally. High-definition rigs and panoramic cameras captured every inch of the set, each panel carefully backlit in red, white, and blue. The producers of The American Pulse had promised viewers the political face-off of the year. On one side of the sleek glass debate table sat Barron Trump, 18 years old, towering at 6'8", dressed in a custom navy suit that did little to downplay his commanding presence. He leaned forward, slightly polished shoes flat against the studio floor, eyes trained ahead. Despite his youth, his posture held the weight of a legacy. Barron wasn't just the son of a former president. He was a political phenomenon, intelligent, articulate, and unnervingly composed. Since starting his freshman year at Georgetown, he'd become the symbol of a reborn conservative youth movement. His following exploded online. He was called the Giant not just for his stature, but for his rising political influence. Tonight, he was here not as a student, but as a contender. Across from him sat Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, 43, calm in a crimson blazer, poised and patient. A former civil rights attorney, now the unapologetic voice for marginalized communities and working families. She wasn't just respected in political circles, she was feared. Her viral congressional takedowns and sharp logic had earned her a national audience. This wasn't a classroom debate, it was televised democracy. And the theme tonight, engaging Gen Z in American politics. In the control room, producers counted down. 5, 4, 3. The lights shifted. Live in 3, 2, 1. The host, Dr. Sarah Martinez, welcomed the nation. Cameras panned, social media feeds lit up. As our American Pulse trended immediately, Dr. Martinez smiled. Tonight, we're joined by two remarkable voices, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett and Mr. Barron Trump, to discuss how we inspire the next generation of Americans to believe in our democracy. Barron nodded respectfully. Jasmine gave a soft smile. Cordial. For now. Jasmine spoke first. She outlined the importance of civic education, grassroots voter registration, and ensuring young people saw themselves represented. Her tone was warm but precise. She didn't oversell. She connected. Barron leaned in, listening. When it was his turn, the air shifted. "Thank you, Dr. Martinez," he began, voice clear, confident. "Congresswoman Crockett raises some interesting points, but I must question whether she's the right person to lead that charge." A pause. The room tensed. Barron continued, calm but sharp. "What we have in Congress right now isn't leadership, it's performance art. Congresswoman Crockett's viral clips may earn likes, but do they earn trust? Her rhetoric divides more than it unites. And while she accuses others of playing politics, she's mastered that game herself." A ripple passed through the audience. Phones lifted. Screens flashed. Jasmine didn't flinch. She waited. Barron pressed on. "Congresswoman, your record speaks of partisan grandstanding. Your tone alienates moderates. And if we're serious about engaging Gen Z, we need unity, not division." The studio grew still. Then Jasmine spoke. "Mr. Trump," she said evenly, "I appreciate your concern. But before you question my qualifications, maybe take a moment to reflect on your own motivations. Legacy can be a powerful thing, but it can also be a mask." Barron blinked. Dr. Martinez looked from one to the other. She knew this was no longer a debate. It was a reckoning. But nobody watching knew just how deep this confrontation would go. Not yet. Not until Jasmine Crockett pulled out her phone and changed everything. Barron Trump sat straighter in his chair, lips drawn in a confident line. He had landed the blow. The crowd's silence told him that. But Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett didn't respond with fire. She responded with something far more unsettling, calm. She reached into her blazer pocket and held up her phone. "I think," she said, her voice smooth but deliberate, "before we continue this important discussion about youth and integrity, there's something the audience and the country deserves to hear." Barron frowned, unsure. Cameras zoomed in. The host, Dr. Martinez, leaned forward. Even the floor crew in the wings stopped moving. "What are you doing?" Barron asked. He sounded more curious than threatened, but there was a tightness in his jaw now, a twitch behind his eye. Jasmine didn't look at him. She looked at the camera. "This is a recording from 3 weeks ago," she said. "A private conversation between Mr. Trump and a Georgetown journalism student. The student didn't intend to expose anything until tonight. Because sometimes political theater gets mistaken for truth, and I think Gen Z deserves better." She pressed play. At first there was only static, then Barron's voice, young, smooth, unmistakably, has filled the studio speakers. "Look, I don't actually believe half the stuff I say in these debates." The audience gasped. Barron blinked. His mouth opened slightly. "It's all about positioning for the future," the recording continued. "These Georgetown kids eat up the constitutional law stuff, but it's just theater. Dad taught me you say what gets you power, then you do what you want with it." Dr. Martinez frozen. The camera panned to Barron. He wasn't blinking. Another voice in the recording, presumably the student. "But what do you actually believe?" Barron's recorded response came without hesitation. "Honestly, I think Dad went too far. The election stuff. January 6th, it was a disaster, but I can't say that out loud. The base would destroy me. So I play the part, build the brand, and pivot later when the time's right." The audience shifted in their seats. Phones were up everywhere now. Hashtags were already forming in real time. Barron tried to speak, but Jasmine raised one finger. "There's more," she said. The recording continued. "These people I debate with, like that Crockett woman, she's smart. Not even that radical, but calling her unfit plays well. My crowd eats that up. That's how you grow in this game? You don't actually think she's dangerous?" the interviewer asked. "Of course not," Barron's voice said. "She's more qualified than half the Republicans in Congress, but I can't admit that and still win. Politics isn't about truth, it's about narrative, and the Trump narrative needs enemies." Click. Silence. Barron's face had gone pale. Jasmine calmly lowered her phone. She folded her hands, leaned forward, and finally looked him in the eye. "So let me ask you this," she said softly. "Who's really unfit? The woman who shows up every day to fight for her constituents? Or the man who just told America on tape that he lies to them, that he uses them, that he sees politics as a costume?" Barron's mouth opened, then closed. No words came out. "The world saw you speak tonight," Jasmine continued. "But now they've also heard you when you thought no one was listening. And what they heard wasn't leadership, it was a calculation." The audience didn't cheer. Not yet, it was too soon. Too raw. Barron finally found his voice. That recording was taken out of context." Jasmine raised an eyebrow. "Which part? The part where you said you don't believe your own arguments, or the part where you said I'm more qualified than your colleagues?" Barron glanced toward Dr. Martinez as if hoping she'd intervene. She didn't. "You questioned my integrity, Mr. Trump," Jasmine said. "You tried to discredit my record, my leadership, my right to speak to this generation. But tonight they saw through you." A student in the audience stood up, then another, and another. Applause began, not explosive, but growing. Honest. Earned. Jasmine stood. Barron remained seated. He looked taller when standing. But right now, seated, he looked like a teenager out of depth, staring at the consequences of a mask removed too early. The crowd's applause surged. Some chanted her name, others simply recorded. Barron quietly reached for his water. His hands trembled. Jasmine turned toward the cameras. "This isn't just about a young man caught in a lie," she said. "It's about a generation demanding that their leaders actually believe in what they say. That they're not pawns in someone else's game. That they're more than just a base to manipulate." She paused. "This is not theater. It's the future of a country. And the truth deserves the microphone now." Fade to black. The segment ended, but the impact didn't. Not even close. As the camera feed faded to commercial, the studio erupted into something between a media frenzy and a political autopsy. Reporters surged forward. Students stood frozen, whispering in shock. Producers shouted into headsets. Even Dr. Sarah Martinez seemed briefly unmoored, gripping the debate table as if the gravity had shifted beneath her feet. But at the center of it all sat Barron Trump, silent. He stared down at his notes, the once crisp pages now folded and ignored. He had always known how to command a room, but tonight the room had turned against him. Mr. Trump, one reporter, called out camera crew in tow. "Do you deny the recording?" "No questions," he muttered, voice low. His security team moved quickly, guiding him out through a back corridor. Cameras tried to follow, but the show staff closed ranks. The exit wasn't dignified, it was damage control. Meanwhile, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett stood calmly accepting the wave of questions and lights with the same poise she'd held all night. Her phone, now infamous, remained in her hand like a gavel. This wasn't about humiliating anyone, she told the first camera. It was about honesty, about what leadership should look like. Within 20 minutes, the hashtag Tajajar Barron Exposed was trending across every platform. The viral clip, not the full debate, not even Jasmine's remarks. Just the moment she pressed play, and Barron's expression shifted from power to panic. That 5-second clip hit 1 million views before the hour ended. Social media responded like a lightning storm. He called her unfit and ended up confessing to political fraud. Unreal. Jasmine Crockett just gave the most surgical takedown I've ever seen on live TV. Barron Trump, the method actor of politics. Barron's online following, a carefully cultivated community of conservative Gen Z idealists, fractured almost instantly. Some rushed to defend him, he's young. This is a setup, fake news as always. But others weren't so forgiving. We thought he was different. Turns out he's just another poser in a suit. The one guy who could have rebuilt conservatism with honesty just admitted it was all a script. On campus, Georgetown University became ground zero for political discussion. Students huddled in dining halls, coffee shops, and study lounges replaying the clip again and again. Even some of Barron's closest supporters looked lost. I honestly believed him, said Sarah Chen, a sophomore who had once introduced Barron at a Young Republicans rally. I defended him to my friends. Now I don't know what to believe. The Young Republicans Club, which had tripled in size since Barron's arrival, held an emergency meeting that night. Dozens didn't show. Those who did sat in silence. Some resigned on the spot. By the next morning, national news had picked it up. CNN led with Barron Trump, bombshell recording reveals calculated political persona. MSNBC dissected the transcript line by line. Even Fox News, typically loyal to all things Trump, stumbled to defend the moment. It's clear the young man was speaking privately, one commentator offered carefully. But the content is hard to ignore. On The View, it became the central topic. He said it himself, he doesn't believe in what he says on air. He lied to build power. That's not youth, that's ambition without ethics. In press briefings, White House correspondents asked if the president had watched the debate. The answer, yes. When asked for comment, Donald Trump posted a single line on Truth Social: Barron is young. He'll learn. The fake news loves to destroy my family. That was it. No thunder, no threats, just retreat. Back at Georgetown, Barron went dark. He missed classes for the next 3 days. His dorm room stayed locked. Friends said he wasn't responding to messages. Professors confirmed he'd requested a leave of absence. The silence said everything. Meanwhile, Jasmine Crockett's star rose like wildfire. Her campaign reported a 400% increase in grassroots donations by the end of the week. Her social media following jumped by hundreds of thousands. Think pieces declared her the future of progressive leadership. Democratic strategists began floating her name for higher office, but when asked how she felt about it all, she gave a measured response. This wasn't about going viral, she said on a late-night segment. This was about truth. If we're serious about restoring faith in democracy, we can't pretend it's okay for young politicians to see leadership as a performance. She paused. And I didn't win that debate because I destroyed someone. I won it because I told the truth when it mattered most. For the students watching, it was a shift. Barron had been the intellectual hero, the poised speaker, the walking encyclopedia of constitutional law. But the illusion was shattered. The words he spoke weren't beliefs. They were strategy. And strategy without conviction, that was manipulation. In the following week, 2 major professors at Georgetown published an open letter in the school paper. The title, The Performance of Politics versus the Purpose of It. It didn't mention Barron by name, it didn't have to. The point was clear: if the next generation of leaders treated democracy like theater, they would inherit a nation too cynical to follow. A journalism student, yes, Jaime Martinez finally stepped forward. I wasn't trying to expose him, Jaime said in an interview. I was working on a profile piece. We were just talking about politics over coffee. But when I saw how different his public attacks were from what he told me, I couldn't stay quiet. The debate reignited an old but pressing question: is it fair to judge someone by what they say in private? Some pundits argued no. We all say things privately we wouldn't say on air, they claimed. But most agreed when someone builds a public career on carefully crafted beliefs, private contradictions matter, especially when they confirm everything people feared. It had been 5 days since the broadcast. 5 days since Barron Trump, the rising conservative prodigy, the polished torchbearer of a legacy, was caught saying the quiet parts out loud. 5 days since Jasmine Crockett played that recording on national television and stripped him of the one thing political legacies need to survive credibility. In the age of virality, 5 days was an eternity. The internet had moved fast. Too fast. But Barron hadn't moved at all. He hadn't left his apartment since the night of the show. His calendar, once packed with speaking invites and donor breakfast, now sat empty on the kitchen table. He hadn't responded to messages, let alone stepped outside. The sunlight barely reached through the tightly drawn curtains. The blue light of his laptop screen was the only illumination flickering across his face as he scrolled through a digital autopsy of his political identity. Every video, every meme, every quote out of context, and worse, the ones in full. Politics isn't about truth, it's about narrative. I'll pivot later when the time is right. Calling her unfit plays well. He played them on repeat, until he hated the sound of his own voice. The backlash wasn't limited to strangers. Georgetown had changed overnight. Posters promoting his speaking event on conservative philosophy had been quietly taken down. Professors canceled panels where he was once the star guest. One email came from his own constitutional law professor, Barron. I hope you're okay. If you'd like to talk, my door is open. I won't lecture. I promise. He didn't reply. Even his allies, those he'd counted on to spin the fallout, were vanishing. The Young Republicans group had gone silent. Their group chat, once a battlefield of memes and organizing, now sat dormant. Sarah Chen had left the group. When Barron messaged one of the execs, all he got was, "You really messed up, man." People believed in you. For the first time in years, Barron was alone. Not just physically, but ideologically. Because the real problem wasn't the tape. It was the fact that everything on the tape was true. He did lie. He had said what people wanted to hear, not what he believed. And even worse, he thought he could get away with it because his last name had always given him a pass. But not this time. Not when the other person on stage was Jasmine Crockett. While Barron unraveled in silence, Crockett moved forward with measured precision. Every interview she gave struck a balance between reflection and fire. She didn't gloat. She didn't celebrate. She explained. "This isn't about taking someone down," she said on MSNBC. "It's about lifting a mirror to the political class, young and old, and asking, what do you actually stand for?" When asked if she thought Barron's career was over, she paused. I think his mask came off before he was ready to be real. The quote went viral. Barron watched the clip a dozen times. His phone vibrated constantly, but not with support. A few calls from his mother. Silence from his father. No tweets, no statements, just that vague he'll learn post buried under a pile of Trump-related headlines. He wondered if his father was disappointed, or worse, indifferent. What stung most wasn't the humiliation. It was the idea that he had been just another performance in a long line of Trump shows, and when the act failed, the spotlight simply moved on. One night, Barron found himself watching the debate again, not the viral clips, but the full, uncut recording of the episode. He studied himself, the posture, the cadence, the facial expressions. It was like watching a stranger, a highly trained stranger. Every word timed, every smirk is deliberate. And then came the shift. Jasmine raises the phone. His eyes flickered. He hadn't realized it at the time, but the mask slipped the moment the recording played. Not because he was caught, but because part of him deep down had wanted it to happen. He was tired of pretending, of performing, of being the heir to something he didn't fully believe in. The next morning, Barron did something unusual. He went for a walk. No security detail, no suit. Just a hoodie, sunglasses, and the hope that maybe the world had already moved on. It hadn't. He made it 2 blocks before someone recognized him. "Yo, Barron," a student called. Are you still building that fake brand or taking the semester off? Laughter followed. Phones came out. Barron turned and walked the other way. Back in his apartment, he opened his laptop not to scroll, but to write. Not a tweet, not a statement crafted by aides, but something real. He opened a blank document. I don't know who I am without the performance, but I know who I don't want to be anymore. He paused. For the first time in days, he felt something unfamiliar clarity. He wasn't ready to speak publicly. Not yet. But maybe he could start telling himself the truth. Meanwhile, on Capitol Hill, a shift was beginning. Jasmine Crockett wasn't just that Congresswoman who owned Barron Trump on TV anymore. She was becoming a voice for something larger. Authenticity, courage, a new kind of leadership. Donors were taking notice, so were party strategists. She had been asked off the record if she'd consider a Senate run. Her answer: "If the time and the people call for it, I'll answer." Young voters, especially women and students of color, flocked to her message. At rallies and town halls, people quoted her debate moments like scripture. This is not theater. It's the future of a country. News outlets dubbed her the anti-act, not because she lacked charisma, but because she wielded it without compromise. Her team launched a new initiative the following week, Jasmine Lead with Truth, a campaign focused on political education, media literacy, and platforming young voices who had something real to say. And the timing couldn't be more perfect, because the country wasn't just reacting to Barron's fall. It was asking what kind of politics would rise from its ashes. In Washington, 5 days after a political earthquake isn't time to recover. It's time to react. And react they did. The fallout from the debate had grown far beyond the walls of the studio. What began as a generational confrontation on a talk show had turned into a national identity crisis within the Republican establishment. In donors' circles, among think tanks, on message boards and backroom calls, the question wasn't whether Barron Trump had failed, it was what his failure revealed. He wasn't just a kid who got caught lying. He was their future projected. Their next phase shattered. In a private gathering hosted by the Heritage Initiative, a top conservative foundation, 30 key players sat in quiet alarm. Senators, advisors, campaign managers. They watched the now famous clip again on a projection screen. The same 5 seconds, Jasmine Crockett pressing play. Barron's face falling. Silence followed. Then Senator Aldridge, a veteran of political messaging, broke it. He cracked under soft pressure. He showed no ability to recover. Worse, he confessed to the very thing our opponents always accuse us of. The strategist to his left added, "We can't build the future of the party on confessionals. This isn't therapy, it's war." The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Barron had been crafted as the ideal post-Trump figure, a principled intellectual heir with just enough fire to keep the base engaged. But the recording had stripped away the facade. Worse, it had confirmed every Democratic talking point about political performance. Behind closed doors, donors began redirecting funds. Super PACs removed Barron's image from promotional material. One right-wing student alliance even suspended a university tour named The Next Right, which had been set to feature Barron as the keynote. "He's politically radioactive," one organizer said. "We need to pivot." And pivot they did, toward safer candidates, toward figures who hadn't yet been caught confessing that it was all just theater. In this storm, Barron watched from the eye of it. Still holed up in his apartment, he read every headline, every betrayal. But unlike before, the shame was being replaced by something else: perspective. The mask was off. And now he had to decide, was there a path forward if he didn't put it back on? He started writing. Not statements, not speeches, just thoughts, his own. At first they were angry, then searching, then be honest. "I thought I needed the brand before I could have the beliefs. But maybe it's the opposite. I thought politics meant strategy. I never asked if it meant service." Late at night, he would walk through the quiet campus under a hoodie, headphones, and avoiding eye contact. He wasn't ready for conversations, but he wasn't hiding anymore either. It was a slow return not to politics, but to himself. Meanwhile, Jasmine Crockett was everywhere. She didn't seek the spotlight, but it followed her now. Her words had struck a nerve not just among liberals, but among independents, educators, young conservatives disillusioned by the Barron debacle. On a Sunday morning roundtable, she spoke to the moment. Look, she said, calm as always, Barron Trump is not the villain here. He's a mirror. And the truth is, a lot of people are doing what he did, saying what sells, not what saves. We need to change that. The moderator asked, do you see him making a comeback someday? I hope he does, she said. But not as a brand, as a human being who's learned something. Her answer didn't go viral, but it earned respect even among her critics. As her stature grew, Democratic leaders began positioning her differently. She was no longer just a strong voice from Texas. She was becoming a national figure. Within weeks, she was invited to keynote a major DNC youth summit. She declined, requesting to instead hold a roundtable with student leaders and first-time voters. I'm not interested in being the next face of anything, she told her team. I'm interested in building a generation that doesn't need faces to lead them. The pivot from confrontation to construction became the hallmark of her post-debate identity. In parallel, Barron received a visit from the one person he didn't expect, Jaime Martinez. Yes, the journalism student who had recorded the now infamous conversation. Jaime had reached out several times. Barron hadn't answered, but now standing in the hallway of Barron's dorm holding 2 coffees, Jaime waited. Barron opened the door slowly. You came to finish the job, he asked flatly. Jaime shook his head. I came to talk. Not an interview, not publish, just talk. A long silence passed. Then Barron stepped aside. They sat across from each other at the small kitchen table. Coffee. Silence. Finally, Barron spoke. You didn't set me up, but you exposed something I hadn't even admitted to myself. Jaime nodded. You weren't the first, but you were the loudest, and most people who heard what you said already suspected it from others. I know, Barron said. That's what hurts the most. I confirmed their cynicism, or Jaime countered you created a turning point. Barron looked up. You're not a victim, Barron Jaime continued, but you have a chance to become an example, not a failure, of growth. They sat quietly for a few minutes more. Then Barron asked, would you help me write something? Not an apology, a reflection. Jaime nodded, only if it's yours. Start to finish. That night they stayed up writing, not to spin, but to tell the truth, the piece was published quietly. No flashy headlines, no PR team, no news conference, just a medium-length essay uploaded to an obscure campus blog known more for thin pieces than breaking news. Its title was simple, The Mask I Built, by Barron Trump. It opened with no excuses. I built a version of myself I thought people wanted to follow, and then I followed him too. There were no political maneuvers in the essay, no red meat statements for a base, no pivot to moderation, no crafted comeback, just self-dissection. Honest, raw, and most surprisingly thoughtful. I don't blame anyone for turning away from me. I turned away from myself first. I spoke words that were sharp and calculated not because I believed them, but because I thought they would make me powerful. I used people's trust as currency. That's not leadership, it's a fraud. The internet wasn't sure what to do with it. Some right-wing commentators immediately dismissed it. Another weak apology tour. These kids have no spine. Others paused. One prominent libertarian pundit tweeted, this isn't an apology. It's a political obituary or maybe a resurrection. Time will tell. Left-leaning circles didn't celebrate either. They acknowledged it cautiously. On TikTok, Gen Z creators reacted with surprising nuance. He's not asking for forgiveness. He's documenting a fall. That's different. The essay kind of hit, not going to lie. Still don't like him. But this was real. And in a rare move, Jasmine Crockett responded. She shared a screenshot of the piece with a caption that read, growth doesn't erase mistakes, but it makes the next chapter worth reading. The comment section was a mix of admiration and critique. Class act. You showed more grace than he did at that debate. I still think he got off too easily. This is what maturity looks like from both of you. Barron didn't give interviews. He didn't accept podcast invitations or appear on late night segments. He didn't run damage control because there was no brand to protect anymore. Just a life to rebuild. At Georgetown, things slowly stabilized. Some students ignored him. Others cautiously greeted him again. A few classmates sent private messages. I read it. Respect. Took guts, man. He walked campus unguarded. He sat in the back of lectures. He spoke when asked, not before. And when he did speak, his words carried a strange new weight, not because they were louder, but because they were quieter. Meanwhile, Jasmine Crockett pressed forward. Her movement, Lead with Truth, expanded from an idea to a nationwide civic initiative. High schools and colleges requested virtual sessions. Local community leaders signed on. It wasn't about her anymore, it was about a culture shift. The debate had been ignited. Now she was building infrastructure. In her office, aides pinned a map showing districts with rising youth engagement. Not just liberal areas. Red and purple counties, too. The message had cut through party lines. At a national education summit, she gave a short speech. Authenticity isn't a strategy. It's my responsibility. It's not the job of young leaders to be perfect, but it is their job to be honest. We don't need another generation of actors. We need citizens. Whole ones. The audience stood, not for the soundbite, for clarity. Meanwhile, across town, Barron Trump sat in a window seat of a quiet bookstore cafe writing, not an essay, not a press release, just a journal. I may never run for office, but I will never speak dishonestly again. I owed that promise to the public. Now I owe it to myself. He watched people pass outside. He imagined what they might think if they recognized him. And then he smiled just slightly, because for the first time in a long time, it didn't matter. He wasn't building a persona. He was rebuilding a person. 6 months later, C-SPAN aired a special roundtable on political transformation hosted at Georgetown. It wasn't a spectacle. No hashtags trended, but it did feature Jasmine Crockett, and one seat beside her empty. Until halfway through the discussion, Barron walked in. Not as a guest, as a listener. He sat quietly, took notes, and at the end raised his hand. When the host allowed him to speak, the room held its breath. Barron didn't lecture. He simply said, "Thank you for letting me be here even when I didn't deserve to be. And thank you, Congresswoman, for holding me accountable when I needed it most." Jasmine met his eyes and gave a single nod. That was all. No applause, no viral moment. Just a quiet exchange of truth. And that was enough. Barron Trump never returned to the spotlight in the same way. But he did return to politics years later as a policy advisor focused on electoral integrity and youth education reform. He never ran for office. He never published a book. But he spoke often, always with care, always measured. He never forgot what it felt like to be unmasked on live television. Jasmine Crockett went on to win a Senate seat 4 years later, becoming a cornerstone figure in a new political era built less on image, more on integrity. Their confrontation became a case study at universities, campaign workshops, and political media ethics courses across the country, not because it was explosive, but because it proved something quietly powerful. In a world obsessed with performance, truth still has the final word.